Working on the cherry wood still. We've got some epoxy that we put on the cherry wood cracks last night. It is now dry and looking to put on some more. Some of these, the epoxy seeped down into the cracks, which is exactly what we wanted. But you can see on some of these that the epoxy isn't coming all the way up to the surface because it seeped down in. Filled it and then just was thirsty, and so now we just need some more epoxy, and so that's what we're going to try to do. Let's see. Hey, Plywood, good to see you. I'm going to mix up some more epoxy. Actually, before I do that, I am going to reposition the camera so you guys can see a little bit better what I'm doing here. I want to, here we go. I'm going to get some 220 sandpaper here. Because this epoxy is dry, not cured yet, but dry, I think I need to rough it up a little bit so that any new epoxy that I put on will actually adhere. I think it's going to be tough to rough it up inside these cracks, but we'll give it the old college try here. I'm not as worried about it adhering to the stuff that's on the surface because that's just going to get planed away anyway. So I'm not too concerned about that, but just want to rough it up a little bit inside those cracks to the extent possible. So that'll be my first step. After roughing up the epoxy that's already there, then I need to mix up some epoxy. And apply some new epoxy on. And I'm just using 220 grit sandpaper for this. That's all it needs to rough it up a bit. Now I'm seeing on the epoxy, there's a fair number of bubbles that formed. What I probably should have done last night and didn't is hit the epoxy with a torch or heat gun to pop those bubbles. But I'm not too worried about it because, again, the surface here is just going to get planed off. So the only thing that's going to be remaining is in these cracks, and I'm not really seeing a lot of bubbles there. Don't anticipate being able to see much in the way of bubbles there. So this doesn't take a lot of sanding, right? Just trying to get into the cracks here. That's the toughest part. Now on some of these, like here, well, over here, I don't have any problem at all. That's certainly filled. But as I get closer to the edge, it's kind of leaked out a little bit here, and so right here near the edge, it's a little bit below the level of the wood. On some of the, I was hoping that the epoxy stayed up above the level of the cracks, because then today I was just going to be flipping them over and filling in any cracks on the back side. But since some of these still need more filling on this side, I'll fill the ones on this side that still need it, and the ones that don't need filling on this side, I'll flip over and fill in any cracks on the back side. Yeah, this one's one really deep that it went in. So got a little bit on the side there. So last night I put tape on the sides, just some painter's tape, to kind of make a little tape dam so that the epoxy wouldn't flow over the edge. After it had been on for a little while and the epoxy had mostly solidified, I removed the tape so that it wouldn't adhere to the epoxy. But I think on the ends, that allowed more to seep out. And so I think that's part of the reason why I've got more leakage on the ends of the boards than in the middles. But there might be another reason for it. I don't know. I put a little bit of dye in the epoxy last night. It's a brown dye, and hoping to somewhat mimic the color of the actual cherry wood. But on my first batch, I got a lot more dye in there than I anticipated. On the second batch, I didn't actually add any additional dye. I just used the dye that was already in the container that I was mixing in, and just diluted it with the new epoxy. So it's really prevalent on this guy right here. The darker areas is the first batch of epoxy, and then the lighter areas is the second batch of epoxy. All right, here's another example, an end of the board that, you know, a lot seeped through, seeped out. I had this one taped on the bottom side, and so you can see it came through and sealed this bottom side, but then left quite a bit of crack right there. And this is the last one that I need to scuff up. All right. Okay, just toss that out of the way. And then I'm going to use a air compressor to blow those off so that any dust is not causing problems. Let me turn on the air compressor. Wait for that to get some pressure. Thanks everyone for joining today. If you wouldn't mind putting in the chat where you're watching from, be interested to hear. I am located in Idaho in the United States of America. So are you watching from the US with me or from somewhere else? Let me know. Last night we had Juan from Argentina, and he's the only international viewer that I was aware of last night, although there may have been others. And turn that off, get that out of the way. All right. I think next I'm going to retape these guys to the extent necessary. All right. This one could use more on that side. So this one doesn't have a need on this backside, so I can focus all of my efforts on here. So again, I'm just using some painter's tape. One of the guys in the chat last night, I think it was Last Breath Woodworks, said that probably would be better to use a packaging tape for this instead of painter's tape. That's probably true. But the painter's tape is a little bit easier for me to access, and it came off just fine last night, so I'm not going to worry about trying to do a different kind of tape. And so I'm just trying to provide a little bit of a lip on the edge, on the top, and then just make sure it's sealed pretty well along the edge here so that the epoxy doesn't just seep out the end. So then it can fill in right in there. Most of this is pretty well filled. There's a little bit of indentation in here, and then a lot on that edge. That's probably all I need for that one. This one has a crack down here on the back side, but much more significant cracks on this end. So we will fix this end before we worry about the other side. The frustrating thing about epoxy is the setup. The particular epoxy that I'm using is stone coat epoxy. It's not really intended for, really, the formulation I've got isn't really intended for this. It's intended for countertops. It has a long working time, but I still want to have things prepped and ready to go before I start mixing the epoxy. Because once the epoxy is mixed, you have a limited amount of time to get things done. So I want to get all of this prepped before I start mixing, which is not how I did it last night. right, that one, I think that's pretty much filled, and it doesn't have anything on the back side that we need to worry about, so I'm going to call him done. And that'll make it so we have a little bit more room. And you could use some more, but I don't think we need any tape for him. Yeah, I could use a little bit more on this one. And, oh, you know what? I could use a little bit more here, but that's much more significant. So I'm going to do this backside for him. Zoo Archer asking why not use dabs of putty? That's a good question. I think somebody suggested epoxy, and I thought, hey, you know what? I've got epoxy. That could look cool. And so went that direction. So yeah, I probably could use putty, or certainly wood filler, or I could make a my own wood filler with glue and sawdust, saw chip, something like that. But I thought this might look a little bit more cool. So we'll see how it goes. Hey, Johnny, good to see you. And let's see, the back side of this one is pretty much crack free. And then the end of there needs a little bit, both of these ends need a little bit more. I probably shouldn't be that worried about some of these ends because I'm probably going to be cutting them off anyway to square up these boards. But as long as I'm pouring epoxy, might as well try and get as much out of these boards as I can. Oh, struggling with the placement of the tripod there. That could use some more. And don't need to worry about the backside. And that should be good. Don't really need to worry about the sides. Yeah, I could definitely use more on both ends. So, as I mentioned earlier, this is just some of the fun prep work. Making sure that the epoxy goes where you want it to go after you mix it up and start pouring. Once I mix it, I've got a limited amount of time before the epoxy starts to dry, and with this particular formulation, it's a pretty long working time. They advertise about 45 minutes of working time, which is more than I need for this, but better safe than sorry. Rather be able to use all of that working time to pour and position the epoxy rather than screen trying to get tape on or whatever. And oh yeah, this one, I didn't realize that this knot went all the way through. So last night when I poured it, I didn't tape this bottom side. You can kind of see I've got a little bit of a bump there where it leaked through and dripped down onto my floor. So feels like it's sealed now, so I don't need to worry too much about it. But all right. I'm not going to worry about the backside on that one. And see, that one's already pretty full, so I'll call him good. And I did tape the underside of this one, and you can see it soaked through, but I've got a fair amount to still do right there. And again, just making some tape dams here. So, hey, Last Breath, good to see you again. Last Breath was on last night and saw the last iteration of this. So I've still got this knot that didn't get filled all the way. I've got another one over on this side, but I'm not as worried. I'm not sure if you can see that. I'm not as worried about this one because I'm probably going to plane a lot more of that anyway, just because of the rest of the branch that I'm going to use this one. Probably this is the side that I want to have more material on. All right, and then this guy. Yeah, he could use a little bit more. And there's nothing on the backside to worry about. So I'll just tape him up. And Last Breath, last night we were talking about the packaging tape rather than the painter's tape. And I was able to take the painter's tape off a few hours after applying. The epoxy had mostly dried, but it wasn't difficult at all to get the painter's tape off. So I'm thinking to try a similar tack today. All right. Okay. So I think that's all the taping that I need to do for now. So we can start mixing and dyeing the epoxy. So I will put all this stuff over here. Try to clear some room for mixing. Yeah, Last Breath says epoxy would definitely be better than glue or putty for keeping those cracks from spreading with seasonal movement down the road. That's good to know. Yeah, I didn't really think about how well it would keep things together in the future, but that's good to know that it would be better for the long term. All right, so I'm just going to use that as my mixing container. Just got a little piece of scrap. Must have cut something out on the bandsaw. I don't remember what, but I'll just use that. And oh, let me grab some gloves because I don't want. There's the gloves. I don't want a bunch of epoxy on my hands. Actually, let me see if I can fit this in here. I think it'll be tight, but I can make it work. Okay. I know probably can't see that, but just got a little glove dispenser that I've made over there. So this box is a little bit bigger than the box that I had in there before, and the box that I used to make the dimensions for that. So I had to kind of shove that box in there a little bit more so than what I did before. Yeah, painter's tape works if you get it off before the epoxy fully cures. If you're going to leave it sit for a few days, that's when the packing tape works best. Yeah, and I'm not planning to leave this for several days. So, all right. So again, just like last night, I'm just going to mix up a small amount of epoxy, and I'm using just a stone coat, just their regular countertop blend, because that's what I've got. And so I've got the epoxy and then the hardener. And then I'm going to mix in a tiny little bit of brown dye. So I'm just going to eyeball this. I'm doing a 1-to-1 ratio between epoxy and hardener. And not very much of either. And then once I get these combined, I need to mix them thoroughly for a few minutes. So that'll likely wear out my arm a bit. But there are worse things in life than a worn out arm. And it will likely recover over time. I'm going to go with a little bit more hardener than what we did yesterday, just so it kind of sets up a little bit better. Hopefully it'll work well. And then I'm just going to try to do one single drop of brown dye. I wasn't careful enough on this yesterday. And okay, it looks like I hadn't opened it up well enough. All of my gentle squeezing was doing nothing. All right, I see a small drop going. Got it. All right, so a single drop of brown dye. Move the dye out of the way, and then we'll get to mixing. And see how dark that is already with just a single drop. And commented last night that even though it's brown dye, it seems to have kind of a green tint to it. So I don't know if it's just the lighting in my shop or just eyes playing tricks on me or something else, but maybe just the way the epoxy interacts with that dye is a little funky. Maybe if I had more than just the single drop, maybe it would look more brown or less green or whatever, but I'm not too worried about it either way. I did think to wear some clothes today that I'm not as worried about getting epoxy on. Last night I was wearing some nicer clothes or newer clothes or anyway, stuff I didn't want epoxy on. So I was trying to be really careful. I'll still try to be careful, but clothes I'm wearing today have already spilled paint and stuff, so I'm not as worried today about my attire. All right. Just want to make sure that the epoxy is well mixed so that the epoxy and hardener interact how they're supposed to. All right. Good for now there. And then I'm just going to drizzle the epoxy into these cracks. I know Lastwood has plenty of experience with epoxy. Anyone else in the chat use epoxy? And if so, tell us about what you do with it, what your experiences have been, and what I'm doing wrong. I'm sure there's something I'm doing wrong that you more experienced epoxy users will no doubt recognize. The nice thing about this is that it really doesn't need to be perfect. I'm going to be planing away in a fair amount of everything that I'm working on today. So, all right, and this is the back side of this one. Looks like it might be the only one that we're doing the back side. I was thinking we'd only be doing the back side of stuff today. And then I'm just going to mix in between pores here so that hopefully it doesn't start drying or curing in the cup. And I'm going to fill this now, and then I'll come back and fill it again after the epoxy on this one has had a chance to seep down in, because this is the first time filling on this side. And I don't know if you can tell this as well as I can see it in person, but I kind of filled this crack initially, and then before I even got all the way to the other side of the crack, it had seeped down so much that it looked like I hadn't filled it at all. And then this is a knot over here causing this crack. last night I noticed that the knots seem to be where the wood was thirstiest for epoxy. So, all right, that seems to be keeping relatively level at the moment. So remind me to come back to that one. Uh, got the epoxy on that one on the wrong side of the downward tilt. It was all just running off to the side instead of going into the crack. This one may already have enough epoxy in it because it's kind of bowed up in the center, and so I'll be removing a lot of that section anyway. So probably don't need to put a ton more on this guy. All right, last breath says it's good you're doing it before planing them down. It will soak and stain a little bit on top where the epoxy sit, but you'll mill that away. Yeah. Johnny says he pours pen blanks, use the powder instead of the dye, use a pressure pot to minimize voids. Okay. What do you mean by a pressure pot? I don't think I'm familiar with that. Yeah, instead of dye, right. I got, even with the misspelled dye, I understood what you meant. And Last Breath uses the mica powders. Got a pack of 100 colors for $40. Nice. Hey, happy? Good to see you. I've got some mica powders as well. I'll just take a little break from pouring to show you my little collection. So the only dyes I've got are the brown that I used earlier, and then this white dye, and then I've got a bunch of various mica powders. So black metallic, gold metallic dust, diamond dust, black glitter, silver glitter, and then this is diamond golden indigo, and just black diamond, and pure pearl white. And then I've got several smaller packets down at the bottom here. I didn't notice at first. So midnight blue and diamond gold and diamond silver pearl and Tuscan sunset. So kind of my epoxy colorant supply at the moment. So I got all of this stuff for our countertops rather than for projects like this. But since I've already got it, might as well use it, right? Give you a little bit different angle here. Maybe better, maybe not. All right, so last breath, use a vacuum chamber on some stuff, but pressure pot on everything that will fit in it. They're not cheap anymore. 10-gallon one, around $600. Wow. And Johnny's lunch break is over. Hey, thanks for joining us, Johnny. Hey, Ray. Good to see you. Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by a pressure pot. Both, I think Last Breath and who else said they use the pressure pot? Oh yeah, Johnny. So I'm not familiar with pressure pots. Can you elaborate and edify my understanding as to what those might be? Sounds like they're expensive, at least now. So maybe it won't matter to me anyway. But because I am cheap. Doesn't need any more. Do a little bit more over here. Okay, this one just needs it close to the edge on that side, and then needs a fair amount over here, right on the edge. Okay. A bit there. Over there seems mostly fine. In here needs a little more. In there a little bit more. I'm hoping that the sanding that I did with the 220 grit will be sufficient for getting the epoxy to adhere with the epoxy that was already there. If not, then much of this will probably just go to waste. So probably a good thing that I'm not using a lot here. All right. It's a long board and pretty straight too. So this is kind of exhibit A of why I wanted to salvage the boards with cracks in them, because otherwise this could be pretty useful. All right. And everyone getting their coffee in. I'll allow it, even though I don't drink coffee. All right. Let's see if I can position the tripod a little bit differently here so you can get a better view of everything. Good stuff over on this side. A little bit more working room. Okay, well, I think that probably didn't work all that great, so I will reposition everything here. I'm actually going to try this end first. And then add a little over here. Probably all that it needs. Try to break the surface tension a little bit. And let's see. Fill this knot as best we can. And this is the rare one that on the end it's actually feels fine. More right in here. That might need a little help. One thing that I really like about this epoxy is that the fumes are not very bad at all. So I'm able to work on it without being masked up. Whereas if I'm using like a JB Weld epoxy or something, the fumes are pretty nasty. I don't usually mask up when I'm using JB Weld, but part of that is because it's usually pretty quick rather than working on it for longer periods of time. All right, so that was the last of the boards. So now you're probably trying to remind me to come back and do the one that we did earlier for the first time, which is this one. And definitely had some seepage, not maybe as much as I was expecting. but we'll still refill the crack. Thanks everyone for joining on the live today. I got this cherry wood from a friend locally. They just cut up their cherry tree and said, "Hey, do you want this?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And so I came and got the branches and cut them up into 1.5 inch thick boards and put them in my homemade kiln right over here. Got the kiln running with some willow planks in there right now. And you can see on the monitor there, it's target temperature of 120, current temperature of 119. So I've got a dehumidifier in there that is extracting the water, extracting the moisture, and then it just dumps it out into this bucket down here. So that was the first step after cutting these boards down into 1.5 or 1.25 inch thick boards. And then I milled up a fair number of the boards and found all these cracks in the others. And so trying to get these filled before milling them down. So I've got a little bit of epoxy remaining here. So I'm going to go back and fill in a little bit more on some of these that have soaked in more. Let's see. Who needs more? We'll do some more over here. And you know, I'm thinking this knot here is going to need more. And I am just about out of this batch of epoxy. I was actually pretty pleased with how well the tape dams held up last night. So a little concerned that they wouldn't hold well enough and that they'd seep through. But they did pretty well. I'm not too worried about them today. All right, and then the thing that I didn't do on the batch last night that maybe I should have is what I'm going to do next. Let's see. And cool kiln, yeah, I like it. Happy. It works pretty well for me. I'm not sure how long it'll take to dry the willow blanks or the willow planks that are in there, because they were pretty wet. I measured them before putting them in, and they were coming out at 60, 70+% moisture. So pretty wet. So what I didn't do last night that maybe I should have is torch the, well, you know what? I should have put more over there, it looks like, but oh well. A little late now, because I've already used up all the epoxy. Well, let me see if I can muster another little bit out here. Yeah, it's about as good as it's going to get. So I'm going to try torching these and see if I can't get any bubbles out. See the little fire that got ignited on the tape? That's fun. All right. I'm not seeing a lot of bubbles, but I'm going to give it another torch here in a minute, just to be sure. All right. Yeah, so then I will let these dry and cure. I think it's supposed to take like 5 to 7 days for the epoxy to cure. So I won't be milling these up for a while, but they'll be dry to the touch within a few hours. Then I can move them around or whatever, but I don't want to start milling them for several days just to be sure that that epoxy is cured completely. And call it good. So I'm just give it another round of torch here. All right. Like we got both the tape and the plastic a little bit on that one. So, all right, that's probably all the bubbles I'm going to get out anyway. So, let's see. Aseo asks, what's the thing you're most proud of making? Let me think about that. Let's see. I'm gonna turn off this light so it's not shining right at the camera there. The thing I'm most proud of making, I made a shoe bench for my wife. I'm just gonna move my router table over here so that I can see the chat a little bit better. But yeah, what I'm most proud of making might be that shoe bench. I also like this router table that I made. Let me clear the epoxy stuff off of here so you can get a better look. I've showed this in a recent video. So, well, I'll just leave the laptop on it. So here's the router table. The cabinet was already there, so I just added the top here, mounted a router to the bottom side, and then I've got on this particular router, it has a threaded rod, so I can raise and lower it just using this right here. So I can kind of micro adjust. And I really like my fence because the fence makes it so that I can obviously guide the pieces through, but it solved a big problem that I had with my other router table, which was dust collection. And so this one, I've just got a little mechanism here like that. So if I show you over on this angle, my vacuum hose can fit right in there. And then I take this guy, put him over the top. And then I can take this guy, push down, slide him in. And that gives me really tight seal. And so I've got all of the vacuum force being concentrated right where I want it, over here. And the fence also has little runners on the edges, so it stays square to the table. So like that, I'm a simple man. So oh, sorry, covering up the camera as I try to reposition. Yeah, and I've got a video on the shoe rack build that I did for my wife, if you want to check that out. And let me get you positioned back over here. Let's see. Say, nice dude, don't have a workshop, but made my partner an herb planter recently from a pallet. Cool. Yeah, I love seeing their reaction. Yeah, it's pretty cool when you can make something out of something that they might have thought of as just waste, and then you go and make something useful out of it. So that's pretty good. The shoe bench or shoe rack that I was talking about for my wife, I made that out of basically wood that I salvaged. I think I might have gotten it from my brother. He was just trying to get rid of stuff in his garage, and so I was like, I'll take it, and then I was able to make a pretty nice little shoe bench for a shoe rack for her. And let's see, on the router table, I like my table saw cart as well. Also solved some problems, related to dust collection. So I bought this table saw used from a cabinet maker in town, so it got used quite a bit, and I ended up having to do a lot to kind of renovate it. So the bevel adjustment didn't work, the height adjustment didn't work, so I had to kind of fix all that. I've actually got a video on how to fix the bevel adjustment on here, but it also came with the mobile stand, and the stand is just fine for what these job site saws are usually intended for, where you're taking the saw to a site, setting it up, and then leaving it there until you're done at that site, and then packing it up and going. And so it was mobile, but you had to kind of fold it all up in order to use the wheels. In my shop, I want to be able to just move it around wherever without packing it up every time, right? And so I built this little mobile base. So it's got locking wheels, right? So I can turn on the brakes so that it doesn't move around on me. And then I've also anticipated space on the backside for the dust collection to come through. And so I've got it hooked up to a cyclone separator and then a little shop vac. And so it keeps the dust way down when I'm using it. The reason I've got this board back here is for the future, because I anticipated when I first built this that I wanted to make an outfeed table, a folding outfeed support, and I just haven't gotten to that part yet. So that's why I've got this board back here, is to help support a folding outfeed support. But like I said, haven't gotten to that part yet. One of these days, maybe. This miter saw station was one of the very first things that I built. Whoa, back at the old house, and I used, maybe not the best techniques. For example, on connecting these, the top here to my vertical supports, I've got my 2x4s, and I'm just using screws into the shelf here, rather than having the 2x4 underneath, so that I've got gravity helping me. Now, obviously, with the miter saw, it's not really that heavy, so it doesn't really need more than just the screws. But I've learned a lot since I built this, and I want to build a new miter saw station that will incorporate dust collection on the cart, and we'll also have some folding outfeed support on the sides. So that's a build that I've been planning for a while. One of these days I might actually get to it. So, and you know what, I'm proud of my workbench and my French cleat wall. I built all of this, so you can't really see the workbench too easily with everything there. When we moved into this house, we had a workbench in the corner, but it wasn't very sturdy and didn't care for it too much. And so I ended up taking it apart and reusing a lot of reusing all the plywood. And so anyway, so I've got shelf down below. I've got 2x6 supports on the sides, a 2x4 support in the middle. And then I've got 2x3s that are the horizontal supports. And unlike with my miter saw station, on this one, I've got the 2x6s. I've got the top shelf resting on top of the 2x6s, so it's much sturdier. And then right here, I've got a little Moxon vise that I've attached to the front of the workbench. A little hard to see with all the epoxy stuff going on. So I built the workbench, built the French cleat wall and all of the French cleat holders that are on the wall, built the shelves up there, built the shelves up there, They go around. So I built this shelf primarily because I had a bunch of 2x6 boards that were 12 feet long that I had salvaged from a deck that somebody was tearing down. And so I needed somewhere to store them that wasn't on the floor of the shop. And so built that to take care of it. Yeah, man can make anything with his hands. Yep, so true. Hey, Elegant, good to see you, man. Saw you on your live yesterday. It was a lot of fun. Everybody check out some of these other creators that are in the chat, like Elegant Woodcraft, and Johnny had to go, but Johnny Lathe Crafts and Last Breath Woodworks, Plywood, Ray and Sandy's is there. Yep. So they all have some pretty cool channels and create some pretty cool stuff. I'm probably forgetting people. Plywood, Happy, Curmudgeon Carving. So they all have some pretty cool channels. They're doing cool stuff. So you should check out their channels. And hey, as long as you're here, you might as well like and subscribe to this channel too, if you haven't already. All right, let's see. Any other questions before we go? Let me show you another view. I'll turn the light back on so we can get good lighting on the view of the epoxied cherry wood. So this just now needs to dry and cure, and then we can mill it up and see what it looks like here in probably a week or so after it's had time to cure. Does the epoxy look like it's a green tint to you on the camera, on the screen? Even though I used brown dye and no green at all, definitely has a bit of a green hue to me. Curious if that's similar for you guys. And oh hey, Elegant, no problem. Yeah, make sure you guys subscribe to all these guys. Yeah, it does look green on screen. Yeah, that makes sense because it looks green in person. So not that shocking that it would also look green on screen. Green on screen. It's not a green screen, but it looks green on screen. And all right. Any other questions, concerns, jokes? If not, I think we'll call it a day, and we'll catch you all next time. So thanks for joining, and hopefully we'll catch you on the next live, and all the videos too. See you.